What if right now, above our heads, there is an object drifting through space that does not belong here? Not a planet, not an asteroid born of our sun, not a comet raised in the icy outskirts of our system, but something alien. Something that formed around another star, perhaps billions of years ago, and only now by chance has crossed paths with us. That object has a name, 3I Atlas. And though its path, in reality, carried it away from us, tonight we will explore a more chilling possibility. What if, instead of slipping back into the dark, 3I/Atlas plunged directly into the sun? Would it disappear without a trace? Or could its fall ignite storms, chain reactions, even mysteries that ripple through every life on Earth? A messenger from the stars. Astronomers had seen something like this only once before. In 2017, an elongated, tumbling object swept through our system. Oumuamua. Its path was too sharp, its speed too high. It had come from beyond the sun's gravity. A true interstellar visitor. Then, in 2019, came the second, Borisov, a glowing comet that looked more like the icy wanderers we knew but carrying the chemistry of a foreign nursery. And then, in 2020, came 3I Atlas, the third of its kind, fainter, fragile, more mysterious. 3 objects in just a handful of years after centuries of seeing none. What did that mean? Were interstellar messengers always passing by, unnoticed? Or had something changed, something drawing them in? Astronomers tracked 3I/Atlas across the night. Its orbit was not bound. It was a one-time traveler, a comet from the deep between the stars. But in our story tonight, we dare to bend the arc of fate. A different trajectory. Imagine that instead of gliding away, 3I/Atlas had passed a little closer to Jupiter, enough for the gas giant's gravity to tug it inward, enough to change its course, enough to aim it directly at the sun. From millions of kilometers away, its fate would be sealed. The sun's gravity well is an unforgiving trap. It would spiral inward, faster and faster, heated to fire as it approached until at last it plunged into the solar inferno. But what then? A grain against a star. The sun is vast beyond comprehension. 1 million Earths could fit inside its golden body. It is 99% of all the mass in the solar system. Compared to that, 3I Atlas, a fragment of ice and dust, perhaps only a few kilometers wide, is nothing. If you dropped a pebble into an ocean, would the ocean notice? Would the sun then even feel the fall of a comet? Science tells us, no. Not in mass, not in gravity, but in light, in heat, in the storms that ripple through the star's atmosphere. There lies the possibility of spectacle. The fire of sun grazers astronomers know this because comets fall into the sun more often than you might think. We call them sun grazers. Thanks to spacecraft like SOHO, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, we have seen thousands. Some skim the solar surface and survive, others vanish in a flash, gone forever. Each impact, though small compared to the sun, creates waves of energy, arcs of plasma, flares, bright scars in the corona. Now imagine, not a local comet, but an interstellar one, carrying materials never before part of our sun, exotic isotopes, complex carbon chains, frozen gases preserved since another system's dawn. For an instant, as it plunged into the solar fire, the sun itself might burn with new colors. The human perspective, here is where the science blurs into psychology. Because for us, comets have never been just comets. In ancient Rome, a comet marked the death of Julius Caesar. In China, records speak of broom stars that swept across the sky as omens of dynasties rising and falling. In medieval Europe, the sight of Halley's comet was painted as a sword of fire, a warning of plague and war. What story, then, would humanity tell if a comet from another star chose to end its journey in our sun? Would it be a cosmic accident, written in numbers and orbits? Or a symbol, an omen, a message from beyond? Ripples on Earth. Even if the sun did not care, Earth would notice. When a comet collides with the sun, it can trigger eruptions, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections. Blasts of plasma, billions of tons hurled into space, carried by magnetic storms. If one of these were aimed at us, the effects could be dramatic. In 1859, the Carrington event showed just how vulnerable we are. A solar storm so powerful that telegraph lines sparked with fire, auroras danced over the tropics, and compasses spun uselessly. Today, our satellites, power grids, and internet would be far more fragile. The fall of 3I Atlas into the sun could at worst ignite such a storm. And yet, even if no storm came, even if Earth was safe, the event would still change us. Because humans are not creatures of pure science, we are storytellers. To see an alien object end its journey by diving into our star would spark waves of wonder, fear, speculation. Was it just a rock, or was it chosen? Was it chance, or was it design? Would we see it as warning or invitation? A cosmic mirror. In the end, 3I Atlas is less about itself and more about what it reflects in us. Our fear of catastrophe, our hunger for meaning, our fascination with the unknown. Because the truth is, if an interstellar comet fell into the sun, the cosmos would not change. But we would. We would invent new myths. We would study with new urgency. We would remember for a time that our star, eternal, unshaken, is still vulnerable to the touch of wanderers. And we would wonder, if 3 such objects have already passed us in just a few short years, how many more are coming, and what paths will they choose? So as we begin this journey, asking not just what if 3I Atlas had crashed into the sun, but what that means for us, our technology, our myths, our survival, I invite you to keep listening. And if these late-night explorations spark your curiosity, if they ease your mind or stir your wonder, I would be truly grateful if you'd consider subscribing to Sleepy Science. It's a small act that helps this community of dreamers and wanderers grow and ensures we can keep following the mysteries wherever they lead. For now, let's rest our thoughts on this image. A star, burning without pause, a visitor diving into its fire, and humanity watching, wondering, inventing stories in the dark. That is where our journey begins. What if the fate of a world could hinge on the smallest of cosmic nudges? A fraction of a degree, a whisper of gravity, a silent tug from a planet so far away that its storms are wider than Earth itself. That is where our story with 3I Atlas turns darker, because if the comet's path had shifted even slightly, its future would not have been escape. It would have been collision, and not with Earth, but with the one force we all depend on, the sun itself. How paths are shaped. Every object in space follows the rules of gravity. 3/ Atlas, racing into our solar system from the cold between stars, was moving far too quickly to be bound. But even fast travelers can be bent, like arrows curving in flight. When it passed near Jupiter, the planet's immense mass could have altered its orbit. It happens often. Jupiter is sometimes called the solar system's cosmic vacuum cleaner, pulling in comets that might otherwise strike Earth. But the same tug can send wanderers into new, dangerous courses. In this case, we imagine Jupiter's invisible hand not as a shield, but as a guide, pulling 3I Atlas off its outbound arc and setting it on a spiral of doom, a course leading straight into the sun. The spiral. As 3I Atlas fell inward, the forces it encountered would be unimaginable. From a distance of millions of kilometers, the sun's pull would drag it faster, faster still. Its icy surface would vaporize. Gases would stream behind it, a tail brighter than cities, visible even in daylight. To us on Earth, it would appear like a second sun rising. A fiery streak in the sky that grew day by day, the ghost of a star falling into a star. By the time it crossed Mercury's orbit, its speed would approach hundreds of kilometers per second. Its body would break, fracture, and burn. Yet momentum would carry the fragments onward, unstoppable. The impact! On the sun's surface, the story would reach its climax. A mass of ice, rock, and alien chemistry small compared to the sun but immense compared to anything on Earth, would plunge into plasma hotter than fire itself. For a brief instant, the sun would flare, a shockwave would ripple outward, magnetic fields would twist and snap, and a coronal mass ejection, a storm of charged particles, could erupt, flinging billions of tons of matter across space. If Earth stood in the path, the consequences would be dire, the earthly consequences. Imagine satellites fried instantly, their circuits overloaded, GPS systems blind, communication networks silent, airplanes forced to land without guidance, power grids struck by geomagnetic currents would collapse. In 1989, a solar storm far weaker than the Carrington event blacked out Quebec for 9 hours. Now imagine storms 10 times stronger, triggered by the fall of an interstellar comet. The world's cities could plunge into darkness, hospitals without power, food supplies interrupted, banking systems offline. For days, weeks, or longer, civilization would be thrust into chaos, and all because a fragment from another star chose to end its life in hours. This is not pure speculation. Astronomers have witnessed sun-grazing comets crash into the sun. In 2011, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded a comet diving into the solar atmosphere, vanishing in light. The sun did not notice, but our instruments did. And then there is history. The Carrington event of 1859, auroras bright enough to read newspapers at midnight, telegraph lines bursting into flame, operators shocked by currents they could not understand. Back then, humanity's technology was fragile but simple. Today, our world is built on electronics. A storm like Carrington, magnified, could tear through our infrastructure like a hurricane of fire. The hidden question. But the true terror lies not only in the damage, but in the meaning. Because 3I Atlas is not local. It does not belong to our system. It is a messenger from beyond. If such an object, by chance or by gravity's hand, fell into our sun and caused catastrophe on Earth, how would we explain it? Would it be dismissed as coincidence, or whispered about as something else? A warning, a test, a deliberate message written in fire, the cosmic domino. In this way, one small shift in trajectory could ripple across the solar system. Not just physics, but psychology. Not just science, but story. Because while the sun would burn on, unchanged, Earth would not. We would be scarred, humbled, perhaps united or divided as by the event. We would ask why. And in the asking, we would see ourselves in a mirror held up by the stars. So, as we leave this chapter, remember, the difference between safety and catastrophe is sometimes only a whisper of gravity. 3I Atlas, the interstellar wanderer, could have slipped away unseen, or it could have fallen into the heart of our system, rewriting the story of humanity forever. And as we step into the next chapter, we must ask, if such a fall could scar our world, what else might these visitors bring? What if the sun, quiet guardian of our days, could be stirred awake into a monster? That is the question that haunts astronomers when they imagine an object like 3I Atlas diving headlong into its fiery surface. Because while the sun seems eternal, steady, and unchanging, history tells us a more fragile truth. The sun has moods, and when those moods flare, Earth trembles. The sun is not still. At first glance, the sun looks calm, a golden disk in the sky, its light constant, its warmth steady. But telescopes reveal chaos, swirling magnetic storms, arcs of plasma taller than Earth, sunspots like voids carved into fire. The sun is a living storm of fusion. It breathes, it rages, it sleeps, and then it awakens. And when something as alien as 3I/Atlas collides with it, scientists wonder, could the disturbance trigger a storm unlike any before? Energy released. Consider this. 3I Atlas was estimated to be several kilometers across. If such a body plunged into the sun at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per second, the energy released would dwarf the detonation of all nuclear weapons on Earth combined. Normally, the sun swallows such events without pause, but sometimes external triggers can push its magnetic fields into instability. Think of a finger brushing the surface of a pond. The ripples can extend far beyond the touch. In this case, the ripple could be a solar flare of unimaginable size. Solar flares and their wrath. Solar flares are bursts of radiation caused by magnetic reconnection. They release as much energy in minutes as billions of hydrogen bombs. When these flares hurl charged particles into space, they create coronal mass ejections, waves of plasma that can strike Earth's magnetosphere. Normally, our planet's magnetic field shields us, but an exceptionally strong event could overload it. The Carrington event of 1859 was one such storm. If it happened today, experts warn it could cause trillions of dollars in damage. Now imagine a flare amplified by the fall of 3I Atlas. Something larger, stranger, more violent. A flare that could not only disrupt technology, but alter the balance of climate, communication, and perhaps even biology. Biological effects. We rarely think of solar storms as a threat to life itself, but radiation has consequences. Airline crews flying at high altitudes during strong storms are exposed to doses equivalent to medical X-rays. Astronauts in orbit would face far worse. If a megastorm erupted after 3I Atlas plunged into the sun, astronauts aboard the ISS or any future Mars missions could be in mortal danger. Radiation storms could fry not only electronics, but human DNA. The very code of life could be scarred by an event written in plasma. Could the sun change forever? This is where the mystery deepens. The sun operates on cycles. Roughly every 11 years, its activity rises and falls. But some scientists have speculated that massive external events could push the sun into rare super flare states. In 2012, NASA observed a solar storm so strong that, had it struck Earth, it would have caused catastrophic damage. It missed us by only 9 days. That storm was natural. Now add the unnatural, the fall of an interstellar comet into the sun. Could the sun's rhythm be altered? Could it awaken into a period of heightened violence, bombarding Earth with storm after storm? For now, we don't know, but the possibility is chilling. This is not just speculation. In 2011, scientists observed a comet diving into the sun and noted unusual activity afterward. It wasn't world-ending, but it raised questions. What if larger objects fell? What if their compositions, heavy metals, exotic ices, interacted with the sun's chemistry in ways we don't yet understand? And here lies the mystery. 3I Atlas isn't just a local comet. It comes from outside our solar system. Its materials could be unlike anything our sun has ever swallowed. The reaction, therefore, could be unpredictable. The sun might treat it as food or as poison. Now imagine the human perspective. The world watches as 3I Atlas grows brighter, its tail stretching across the heavens. News reports warn of potential impacts on satellites. Telescope feeds go viral, and then, one day, the comet vanishes into the sun. At first, nothing happens. Then, a burst, a shockwave. Auroras brighter than ever recorded sweep across the planet. Radio blackouts stretch for days. The internet collapses in regions, governments scramble, panic rises, and the question spreads faster than the storm itself. Did something from another star just awaken our own? As we close this chapter, we find ourselves on the edge of terror and awe. The sun is our life giver, but also our destroyer. Its moods shape our world, its storms touch our machines, and its silence is the thin thread we all depend on. With 3I Atlas as a trigger, we must ask, could a visitor from another system transform our sun into something monstrous? What if the true danger of 3I/Atlas colliding with the sun wasn't the cosmic violence itself, but the fragility it reveals in our civilization? Because in the end, humanity is less threatened by exploding stars than by collapsing systems. The web we built, modern life, is woven together by invisible threads. Electricity, satellites, internet backbones stretching across oceans, air traffic controlled by signals bouncing from orbit, banking secured by split-second data transfers. It feels solid, it feels permanent, but in truth, it's delicate. And all of it depends on calm skies. When the sun rages, those invisible threads burn. The domino effect. Consider this chain reaction. A coronal mass ejection triggered by 3 I/Atlas slamming into the sun erupts toward Earth. Satellites are blinded or destroyed by radiation. GPS collapses. Navigation becomes uncertain across oceans and continents. Power grids, like the one in Quebec that famously failed in 1989 from a solar storm, begin to overload. Transformers burn. Entire regions fall into blackout. Internet cables, thought safe under oceans, suffer surges at landing points. Planes are rerouted or grounded. Hospitals reliant on networked data lose access. Within hours, the smooth fabric of the modern world tears apart. This isn't fantasy. In 1989, a relatively minor solar storm knocked out power to 6 million people in Canada. In 2003, the Halloween storms disrupted satellites and forced airlines to change flight paths. And in 1859, the Carrington event caused telegraph lines to burst into flames. NASA and the European Space Agency regularly warn that we are overdue for another Carrington-scale storm. Now imagine one multiplied, triggered by an alien intruder into the heart of our star. Technology failing is one thing, but what about people? In 2020, studies revealed how dependent human psychology is on constant connectivity. When networks fail, anxiety rises sharply, panic spreads faster than the outage itself. Markets crash not only from lost transactions, but from fear. A megastorm sparked by 3 I/Atlas could do more than disrupt. It could destabilize. And instability, history teaches us, is dangerous. Interestingly, ancient civilizations may have lived through echoes of solar wrath. Archaeologists studying petroglyphs and myths have found records of sky fire and dragons of light that align with aurora sightings from unusually strong storms. The Maya, Chinese and Norse all have tales of suns behaving strangely. Were they simply describing myths, or were they survivors of past solar tantrums? If so, their warnings are clear. When the sun misbehaves, human order trembles. And here is where the worst-case scenario deepens. If 3 I/Atlases fall, spark solar chaos, it will not be Earth alone that suffers. Mars, a planet now bristling with robotic explorers, is far more vulnerable. It has no magnetic shield, no dense atmosphere. Solar radiation could fry rovers, blind orbiters, and erase years of exploration in hours. Human dreams of colonization would be pushed back decades. For some, it might seem intentional, as if the universe itself resists our expansion. But perhaps the greatest fear is not fire or radiation. It is the idea that we are not in control, that a single event, the plunge of a comet from another system, could erase centuries of progress in days. For modern humanity, raised on the belief that technology is invincible, this would be a psychic wound. It would remind us that we live at the mercy of the skies. We see the fragility of the systems we depend on. The worst case is not simply a burned satellite or a blackout. It is the cascade of failures, the panic, the collapse of confidence. In the next chapter, we will move from systems to survival. How would humanity respond if our star, now stirred awake by 3 I/Atlas, turned from life-giver into a hostile force? And what hidden strengths might emerge when civilization is pushed to its breaking point? What if 3 I/Atlases plunge into the sun didn't just test our technology, but our survival as a species? Because while systems fail, humans adapt. And history shows us that when the skies turn against us, survival depends on speed, unity, and imagination. The first hours. In the first hours after a solar superstorm, confusion reigns. Governments struggle to confirm what has happened. Communications falter. Rumors spread faster than facts. But some nations, particularly those already preparing for such events, would respond quickly. In the United States, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, has strategies for grid shutdowns to prevent transformer damage. In Europe, space weather centers issue alerts. In Asia, massive underground data vaults may preserve key records. Preparedness could mean the difference between a temporary disruption and a societal collapse. Underground worlds. If solar storms made Earth's surface hazardous, with radiation pouring through weakened magnetic shields, Life might retreat underground. Already, cities like Montreal, Helsinki, and Tokyo have extensive subterranean infrastructures. In a worst-case scenario, these could expand into survival bunkers. Mars mission planning has even considered lava tubes as habitats for shielding against radiation. On Earth, the same strategy could apply. In the event of a solar apocalypse triggered by 3I Atlas, humanity could quite literally move below the surface. Spacecraft at risk, spacefarers, however, would not be so lucky. Astronauts aboard the ISS could receive lethal doses of radiation without rapid sheltering. Future missions to the Moon or Mars might be doomed if caught in interplanetary space during a storm. NASA has considered storm shelters within spacecraft, water-lined compartments that absorb radiation. But a storm triggered by 3I/Atlas could last for weeks, even months. Human exploration of space could grind to a halt. Agriculture in crisis. One overlooked consequence of a solar storm is agriculture. Modern farming relies on satellites for weather prediction, GPS for machinery, and communication networks for supply chains. Without these, crops could fail, not from lack of sunlight, but from lack of coordination. And then comes the climate effect. If enough debris or dust were thrown into solar orbit by 3I Atlas's plunge, Earth's light balance could shift. Some models suggest solar dimming could lower global temperatures, threatening harvests for years. A true survival blueprint would have to include not just power and communication, but food. Seed vaults like the one in Svalbard might become humanity's most valuable resource. Lessons from the Cold War. During the Cold War, governments prepared for nuclear war with bunkers, stockpiles, and continuity of government plans. Ironically, these dusty strategies might prove useful again, not for nuclear fallout, but for solar wrath. The US Mount Weather Facility, Britain's Burlington Bunker, Russia's Yamantau Mountain Complex, all relics of another age, could become command centers in a solar emergency. And ordinary people might find themselves adopting Cold War habits too: food storage, off-grid living, low-tech backups. Cultural shifts. Survival is not only physical, it is psychological. Strong solar storms might reshape culture itself. With technology crippled, old skills could regain value. Carpentry, navigation by stars, oral storytelling. Communities might rediscover cooperation. Religions might surge with new interpretations of celestial wrath. And perhaps the greatest shift would be humility. Humanity, so confident in its mastery of machines, would be forced to remember its dependence on the sun. But always, the shadow of 3I/Atlas would loom over these struggles. This was not an ordinary storm. It was triggered, perhaps even engineered, by something from beyond our system. Some would insist it was coincidence. Others would whisper of alien design. The survival blueprint, therefore, would not just be about enduring the storm, but about preparing for the possibility that 3I/Atlas itself was more than a rock. That it was a test, or a weapon, or a message. In this chapter, we have glimpsed humanity's survival strategies: underground shelters, fallback systems, ancient skills reborn. But survival is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we will explore a more unsettling question. What if the storm sparked by 3I Atlas does not end? What if the sun itself, awakened, begins a new era of instability? An era in which survival must stretch not for weeks, but for generations. What if the fury of the sun, once awakened by 3I Atlas, never returned to sleep? What if this was not a passing event, but the beginning of a new solar era, a world where the storm becomes the new normal? The relentless sun, the sun has always cycled between activity and calm. 11-year cycles of sunspots, peaks and valleys. But sometimes cycles break. Paleoclimatic studies of tree rings and ice cores suggest that solar activity has had long, unstable phases before. The Maunder minimum in the 17th century led to colder winters across Europe. Other periods of heightened solar activity left traces of radioactive isotopes in Earth's crust. If 3I Atlas acted as a spark, what if the sun tipped into an age of chaos, its magnetic fields permanently unsettled? Perpetual aurora. Imagine the skies of Earth under such a sun. Auroras not just at the poles, but stretching across every latitude. cities bathed nightly in shifting curtains of green, red and purple. Beautiful, yes, but a signal of radiation constantly bombarding the atmosphere. Navigation systems would be nearly impossible to maintain. Radio communication, perpetually unstable. Space exploration, all but halted. Humanity would live beneath a planet-wide warning sign, the sky itself aflame with storms, survival in permanence. Temporary survival is one thing. But what does survival look like when the storm never ends? Governments would have to shift economies underground. Cities might become shielded, domed, or burrowed into mountains. Satellites would need to be hardened or abandoned altogether. A new kind of civilization might emerge, a hybrid of ancient and futuristic. Local economies, barter and resilience reborn, yet powered by underground servers and shielded reactors. We would adapt, but slowly, painfully, and unequally. Mars abandoned. For Mars, the consequences would be fatal. Already fragile under the best of circumstances, its thin atmosphere offers almost no protection. If solar storms became constant, every robotic mission would fail within years. Dreams of colonization would wither. Mars in this scenario becomes a forbidden planet, not because of its own hostility, but because the sun itself has turned against us. Echoes of catastrophe. In ancient myths, there are stories of suns that went mad. The Egyptian Eye of Ra, which scorched Earth in anger. The Aztec suns that destroyed humanity in cycles of fire and flood. Were these simply allegories, or faint memories of earlier solar chaos that scarred our ancestors? If so, 3I Atlas may not have been the first trigger. Perhaps the cosmos has stirred our star before. The alien hypothesis. And yet, the deeper mystery lingers. Was this chaos truly chance? Or was it engineered? If 3I/Atlas was a natural wanderer, the sun's endless storm is an accident. But if it was designed, if it carried exotic elements, or was programmed to destabilize our star, then this is more than catastrophe. It is war. Silent war, waged not with weapons but with stars themselves. As we leave this chapter, the nightmare takes shape. A sun forever in turmoil. A humanity forced into shadows. A future where space itself becomes hostile, where Mars is abandoned, and where our own skies never rest. And yet, the question sharpens. If 3I Atlas was a messenger, what was the message? And more importantly, could we ever answer back? The sun, once our lifeline, had turned into a relentless enemy. And yet, humanity has never been one to accept extinction quietly. If 3I Atlas had pushed our star into chaos, the question was simple. Could we fight back? This chapter explores the desperate strategies, wild ideas, and dangerous technologies humanity might employ to reclaim control, a cosmic counterstrike against the fury of a star. The science of resistance. First, let's understand the problem. The sun storms unleashed by 3I Atlas weren't ordinary. They were magnified. Coronal mass ejections multiplied, solar flares intensified, and charged particles battered Earth's atmosphere relentlessly. Historically, we've seen glimpses of this kind of power. The Carrington event of 1859, when telegraph systems worldwide caught fire from solar currents. The Quebec blackout of 1989, when a solar storm collapsed Canada's power grid in under 2 minutes. The Miyake events, mysterious radiation spikes in tree rings dated to 774 and 993 AD, thought to be evidence of massive solar outbursts. Now, imagine these not as isolated incidents, but as a permanent reality. If we were to survive, humanity would need to turn science into a shield. The first proposal was audacious. Scientists suggested launching a fleet of solar sentinels, satellites designed not to harness the sun's energy, but to deflect or disperse its storms. Ideas ranged from magnetic shields placed at Lagrange points to redirect charged particles, plasma injectors, seeding the solar wind with counteracting fields, even massive reflective sails to scatter radiation before it reached Earth. These weren't fantasies. They were extensions of real projects like NASA's concept for a magnetic shield at Mars, designed to terraform its atmosphere by blocking solar wind. If it could be done for Mars, why not for Earth? But the scale was unimaginable. We'd need structures the size of continents, and the cost? Entire global economies. Yet what price is too high when survival itself is at stake? Underground civilization. Even as engineers dreamt of spaceborne defenses, others turned their focus inward. Across the world, vast underground complexes began construction. What once were metro systems or mining tunnels became prototypes for subterranean cities. Helsinki had already built an underground world beneath its streets. Shopping centres, swimming pools, even churches. Montreal's Riazo stretched for miles, housing thousands in safety from harsh winters. Military bunkers, Cold War relics, were repurposed as seeds for tomorrow's civilizations. If the sun could not be tamed, perhaps humanity would hide from it, waiting out centuries of chaos beneath the surface. Mars, the great gamble. For a time, Mars seemed the answer, but under the stormy sun, Mars became a death trap. Its thin atmosphere offered no protection. Every probe, every rover, every outpost failed faster than anyone expected. Still, the dream persisted. Some scientists argued, if we could build artificial magnetic fields, Mars might one day become habitable. The European Space Agency even theorized it, a giant magnet at Mars' L1 Lagrange point, powerful enough to deflect the solar wind. In the Age of 3 Atlas, this idea was revived, not as a plan for colonization, but as a desperate measure to preserve at least one branch of humanity beyond Earth. The nuclear sunshot. Then came the most dangerous idea of all. What if we fought the sun with force? Nuclear warheads, hurled into space, detonated at the sun's surface. Not to destroy it, impossible, but to stabilize it. The logic was grimly elegant. If 3I Atlas had disturbed the sun's magnetic balance, perhaps carefully timed detonations could reset the cycle, but the risks were catastrophic. One wrong calculation, and we could worsen the storm, turn a solar furnace into a bomb. Still, whispers of Project Sunshot leaked from shadowed labs. If humanity reached its breaking point, the unthinkable might become the inevitable. Alien questions. Yet another possibility haunted every scientist, every leader. What if 3IA-TLAS was not a random wanderer? What if it was sent? Some believed the object carried engineered isotopes, exotic matter designed to destabilize stars. If so, our struggle was not just with nature, but with intelligence far beyond our own. In that case, every human counterstrike was being watched, measured, judged. Was this a test or an extermination attempt? And if we fought back against the sun itself, would we be drawing the attention of powers we could not hope to understand? A civilization at the edge. Picture Earth in this era. The skies alight with endless auroras, underground cities humming with life, a handful of satellites shielded and battered, still clinging to orbit, engineers in dimly lit bunkers planning magnetic shields, plasma weapons, nuclear strikes, and above it all, the sun, no longer a benevolent star, but a roaring, unstable beast. This was no longer a question of survival for years or decades. This was the challenge of a new epoch. Could humanity evolve quickly enough to survive it? Or would we vanish, leaving only traces of fire-blasted cities for future civilizations or alien archaeologists to discover? As the chapter closes, humanity stands divided between desperation and determination. Some hide, some fight, some dream of abandoning Earth altogether. But one thing is certain. The arrival of 3I Atlas has turned humanity into something new, a species forced to confront the very star that gave it life. For months, humanity believed it was locked in a battle with nature itself. The sun destabilized by 3I Atlas, the sky aflame with storms. But as time passed, patterns emerged that defied coincidence. The chaos wasn't random, it was deliberate. This chapter uncovers the terrifying possibility that behind 3I Atlas lies not chance, Not physics, but intention. An enemy hidden in the cosmos, one we may have been blind to until now. A star that behaved too strangely. Solar scientists noticed it first. Normally solar storms follow cycles. 11 years of peaks and troughs, predictable like the beating of a cosmic heart. Yet after 3I/Atlas skimmed close to the sun, the outburst became patterned. Bursts of solar flares arrived at precise intervals like a drumbeat. Coronal mass ejections fired in mirrored pairs as though echoing. And most chilling, certain bursts seemed directed. Instead of expanding in all directions, flares curved unnaturally, aimed directly toward Earth, Mars, and even probes orbiting Jupiter. Natural chaos had become targeted precision. In secret conferences, astrophysicists debated a shocking possibility. What if 3I/Atlas wasn't just destabilizing the sun, but using it? By nudging plasma flows and magnetic fields, it could turn the sun into a transmitter, a star-sized radio, a beacon broadcasting across light years. We've seen similar mysteries before. The WOW signal of 1977, a 72-second radio burst from deep space that has never been explained. Fast radio bursts, FRBS, some repeating with eerie regularity, as if artificially timed. Tabby's star, dimming and brightening so strangely that scientists briefly wondered if it was cloaked by alien megastructures. Now, Earth wondered, had our sun been hijacked into that same role? And if so, who was listening? Ancient records of a pattern. Historians were called in. Strangely, old myths suddenly seemed less like stories and more like records. Ancient Chinese astronomers described guest stars and dragons of fire that coincided with solar storms. The Mayans recorded celestial visitors tied to shifts in agriculture and sky patterns. Even Norse mythology's Ragnarok, the sun darkening, stars falling, mirrored what modern scientists now feared. Were ancient people documenting earlier encounters with objects like 3I/Atlas? Had humanity been warned, but forgotten? Mars, the silence. While Earth reeled, Mars provided another clue. Before communications collapsed, satellites detected a bizarre phenomenon. Auroras at the equator. This should have been impossible. Mars' weak magnetic field only allows auroras near the poles. Yet now, glowing curtains of light draped the whole planet. Then, silence. Every rover, every probe, gone. It wasn't just solar storms. Something had targeted Mars's technology. And worse, strange geometric shadows appeared in orbital photos before the feeds went dark. Angular forms too regular to be natural, lingering near the terminator line. Were these structures, or projections created by 3I/Atlas itself? The enemy revealed in data. At the height of the chaos, one final clue emerged. NASA's Parker Solar Probe, skimming the corona itself, picked up signals buried in the solar noise. When decoded, they weren't random. They were pulses, 1011, binary, a message written into the sun's outbursts. What did it say? The translation was incomplete, fragmented by interference, but enough was clear. It was not a warning, it was not a call for help, it was a status report. Someone somewhere was monitoring the sun as though it were a machine under their control, and humanity had just realized it wasn't fighting nature. It was caught in a war between civilizations, one side invisible, the other using our star as a weapon. What this means for humanity. The implications were devastating. If 3I/Atlas was technology, not a rock, then the storms were intentional. If the sun had become a transmitter, then Earth was no longer hidden. We had been noticed. The greatest fear of the SETI community, that revealing ourselves could invite destruction, might already have come true. Not because we sent a signal, but because our star had been turned into one. So now the story shifted. This was no longer a tale of humanity versus the sun. It was humanity versus something beyond the sun. The terrifying truth was clear. The worst-case scenario wasn't just a star in chaos. It was that we were pawns in someone else's game. We faced the inevitable question. If 3i Atlas is not just a cosmic visitor but a weapon, then what is its target? And is it us? The mystery was over. 3i Atlas wasn't a comet, wasn't an accident of the cosmos. It was an instrument. And the sun itself had become its amplifier. But if the sun was no longer just a star but a weapon, then humanity's future would be determined not by the light in our sky, but by whoever now held control of it. This chapter is the chilling conclusion, the ultimate worst-case scenario. The first signal to Earth. It began with silence, then a hum. All over Earth, radios crackled at once. Not music, not static, but a synchronized vibration, like the deep growl of the universe itself. Scientists triangulated the source. It didn't come from satellites or deep space relays. It came from the sun. Encoded within that vibration was a pattern, not random, not human, binary, a continuation of the Parker probe's intercepted stream, and then translated, observation complete. Awaiting instruction. It was not addressed to Earth. It was a report. But someone, somewhere, was listening. Solar siege. The weeks that followed tore apart what was left of humanity's illusions. Targeted flares blasted Earth's satellites one by one, leaving the planet blind. Power grids collapsed as induced currents melted transformers. Mars remained silent, a ghost world smothered in auroras. The sun had become hostile, like a siege engine turned against its own children. And for the first time in history, humans realized they were not simply observers of the universe. They were subjects. Who or what sent it? Speculation turned darker than ever. The architect's theory. 3i/Atlas was a probe left by a civilization that had mastered stellar engineering. By embedding instructions in stars, they could transform suns into communication hubs or even weapons. The Warden theory. Perhaps 3i/Atlas wasn't hostile at all, but part of an interstellar policing system. If young civilizations like ours grew too noisy, the Wardens would ensure they never left their solar systems. Our sun's weaponization was the lock on our prison. The test theory. Maybe 3i Atlas was a test. Civilizations that survived the destabilization of their star might prove themselves worthy. Those that didn't simply vanished into silence. Each theory was terrifying. Each had fragments of truth. Humanity's desperation nations united as never before. The last surviving space programs pooled their resources into one desperate act, Project Umbra. The goal was not to fight 3i Atlas. That was impossible. The goal was to escape it. Deep space arcs were designed, meant to carry fragments of humanity toward distant stars, nuclear drives, cryogenic sleep, and AI navigation. But the irony was brutal. The very star they needed for launch power was being used against them. Flares surged, solar winds scattered rockets, the sun itself denied their escape. The final discovery. Then came the last revelation, one so unbearable it was almost laughed off at first. Hidden in the final streams of solar data, in the binary pulses still echoing across the system, was a message fragment. Longer than before, clearer. It read, "Observation complete. Species analysis non-compliant. Initiating harvest." Harvest. That single word broke humanity. It meant Earth and Mars were not targets of chance. They were crops, and the sun, our life-giver, had been turned into the scythe. When the sky turned red, the end began with colour. Across Earth's skies, the auroras bled south. Not just poles, but entire continents bathed in red and violet sheets. The upper atmosphere shimmered like liquid fire. Astronomers, what few remained, knew the truth. The sun's magnetic fields had twisted into shapes never seen before. Not random chaos, but spirals, structures. Then came the largest coronal mass ejection in history. Not a natural eruption, but one shaped, guided, hurled like a spear directly toward Earth. It was not simply radiation. It was energy sculpted with intention. Within hours, every electrical system failed. Within days, crops withered under altered radiation. Within weeks, oceans began to warm at unnatural rates. The harvest had begun. The last broadcast. Somewhere in a mountain bunker, a group of scientists and storytellers managed to record one last message, a chronicle of what humanity had seen, what it had feared. It wasn't a call for help. It wasn't even resistance. It was a story hurled into the cosmos in the hope that someone someday would hear it. Here lived a people who dreamed of the stars. We were not ready, but we dreamed the transmission was aimed away from the sun to distant space before the bunker went dark forever. Epilogue. Beyond the flames. We don't know what happened after. Perhaps, but the truth remains. 3I Atlas was never a comet. It was a knife wrapped in starlight meant not to enlighten but to reap. And the sun, our God, our giver, our endless warmth, was the weapon we never saw coming. Closing thought. So the worst-case scenario was not impact, not fire, not even extinction. The worst-case scenario was that humanity never owned its fate at all. That the universe had been watching, measuring, and waiting. And when 3I Atlas arrived, it wasn't a visitor. It was the verdict